when we deal with heart blocks, you have different degrees of heart blocks. So we have heart blocks that you have AV nodal heart block, where your AV node gets blocked. Then you come down, you have infranodal, okay, within the node down here, a bundle of His, okay, and then we have our bundle branch blocks, okay. And when you get further down, higher degree blocks, you have a third degree, which is a complete block, which we'll talk about in a second. So they're classified according to the site of where it's blocked, okay? And there's different reasons for the blocking. We're not going to get into that, but I'm going to just explain these to you real quick. It'll blow your mind right now. First degree block. What's happening is you see that we have a P wave, and then your QRS, P wave, QRS, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The rate is about 50, so it's a bradycardia, but my PR interval is extended. It's greater than one big box. So if I look here, because this one's easier to see the P waves, here's my P wave. So we start here, and we go all the way over here. It's an extended P wave, so PR interval. So what happens is you have your SA node that fires, sends the signal down, the AV node holds onto it, right? And waiting for the fulfilling of the ventricles. Well, the problem is that AV node holds on just a little bit too long, which when you hold on to it longer, it slows the rate down, okay? And then it releases, you have the contraction, comes, holds. Releases, contracts, holds. So now what you're doing is, instead of it being 60 to 100, we've now slowed it down because the AV node's holding on to it too long and then allowing. It is a regular rhythm. When you first look at it, everyone thinks that it's a sinus rhythm, but you have to look at the PR interval. Your PR interval, here to here, or looking at this one, here to here, is extended. So I have a P wave, I have a QRS. For every P wave, there's a QRS. It's a 1-to-1 ratio, okay? I have a regular rate that marches out. It's just that my PR interval is extended, making it a first degree block. Usually this is the vagus nerve gets stimulated. So my PR interval is long because my vagus nerve gets stimulated. The vagus nerve, through the parasympathetic response, slows down the rate, okay? And it holds on to that AV node. That vagus nerve can hold on to that AV node, okay? So that's what can happen. All right. Second degree type 1. We have two different types of second degree. So you have second degree type 1 and second degree type 2. So a second degree type 1 is called a Winky block, or a Mobitz type 1, okay? Okay, we're going to get into some really crazy names. Don't worry about it. Your second degree block is going to cause your PR interval to get longer and longer, and then it drops a QRS. So what happens is your AV node holds on and then releases. And the next time around it holds on and then releases. And then goes around again, holds on, and then releases. So it's getting longer and longer, and then all of a sudden you're going to see a P wave, which right here is the P wave. It's kind of hidden in that T. Here's your P wave without a QRS. Okay, come here, PR interval, getting longer, 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 and then I have a P wave right here and no QRS. It holds onto it so long that it dissipates the electricity and it doesn't cause the ventricles to contract. And then everything ramps up again, and you get your P wave, QRS. P wave, QRS. P wave, QRS, and then you go P wave, nothing. Okay? So your PR interval is increasingly prolonged until you drop a QRS, and then it goes right back to normal. That is a second degree type 1. Okay? Your QRS is still narrow, but your P wave, you'll have a P wave without a QRS. So you don't have a 1-to-1 relationship there. Okay? Repeated pattern of it. So this bottom one here, this is a lead 2. So you got a P, QRS, and then you notice it's getting a little bit longer, and then you have a P wave without a QRS. Okay? So the characteristic of a second degree type 1 is that your PR interval gets extended, okay, and then drops a complex. Your second degree type 2, the PR interval is consistent, but it drops a complex. So every once in a while there's a block where it just doesn't allow the signal to get down to the ventricles. So your PR interval is consistent and within normal range, but then you end up having a P wave without a QRS, okay? So it looks like a normal rhythm, but then you see these P waves without a QRS. And that's because there's a block there, okay? That's a second degree type 2. That's a higher degree block. and so the signal is not actually making it through down to the ventricles. It's intermittent. And so that's a second degree type 2. There is consistency with your PR interval. Kind of like a misfire, yeah. All right, so consistency with your PR interval. Second degree type 1, your PR interval is getting prolonged and dropping in complex. At second degree type 2, it's staying consistent but dropping in complex, dropping in QRS, okay? And you have your type 3. The third degree is a complete AV block, meaning there is no relationship between your P waves and your QRSs. So you have P waves, and those march out consistently. So the SA node is sending the signal, and you're getting the contraction of the atria, but then we have a block somewhere down lower in the septal area that is, every once in a while, a contraction happens, but it's not necessarily, there's no consistency with it. So then you have your QRSs that march out consistently, but they don't match up with each other, okay? So there's no PR interval, because if I look at it this way, okay, my PR interval is here, but then here it's extended out, but then here it's really short, okay? There's no rhyme or reason for what's happening there, okay? So basically your SA node is not, and your AV node are not talking to each other, and the rate is really slow because there's no relationship there. It's like somebody, you know, I have a cohort that used to work with me that she used to say, yeah, it's like they're going through a divorce, and so they don't talk to each other. Their lawyers talk, they don't talk to each other. So they'll sit in a room and they'll sit at opposite ends of the table, and she's talking to her lawyer, he's talking to his lawyer, but they don't talk to each other. Okay, there's no relationship there. All right. Okay, so with that, what do they need? What do you think they need if we have total no communication between the two? Anyone have any idea what they might need?
I can't remember the name of the procedure, but where they go in through the femoral artery and unclog.
That's a for cath lab. That's for going in and dealing with an occlusion. With this, they need a pacemaker. So what'll happen is because there's no relationship between how everything is firing, they're going to go in and regulate it because it slows down the rate so much that the person can't deal with that. Look, 30, a rate of 30. Can anyone in here do a rate of 30 and be okay with that? Do you think you're going to perfuse adequately at a rate of 30? No. Okay. At some point, that rate of 30 is going to slow down even farther, and then we're going to end up having somebody go into cardiac arrest. So they put a pacemaker in so that they can start regulating, and now they have mechanical. Hey, we're going to do this for you since you can't do it now, and so the pacemaker actually sends the signal, and now we got everybody communicating with each other again. Okay. So they need the pacemaker. Thank you for that response, though. That's Catherine. That they go in and they can ablaze if you've got misfire happening in certain areas. But they also catheterization when they put in place stents. That is for blockages and stuff like that. There's other procedures they do in the heart, all kinds of different stuff. Like depending on what they, if they go in, they find that there's calcification. They might be able to go in and clean the area out and have flow happen again. But a lot of times the person will just get a pacemaker, depending on their age. Okay. All right. Supraventricular tachycardia. I had mentioned this before. When the rate gets above 140, then it becomes a supraventricular tachycardia. Sinus tach is over 100, but below 140. Okay. Over 140, I think now they've changed it to 150, but a higher rate is going to end up being your supraventricular tachycardia. So now we know that it's fast. Okay, so it's a fast rate, but it marches out consistently. Okay, so it's a regular rhythm. Your PR interval is less than a big box, so we're good. Your QRS is narrow, within range. So if you have a P wave, it's difficult to see depending on how fast it's going. Okay, that rhythm might be going so fast that it's got to get slowed down in order to get figured out what's going on with it. Okay, what the underlying rhythm is. So a lot of times with supraventricular tachycardia, we want to slow down the rhythm to see what the underlying rhythm is. Is it a true SVT that we can deal with medication, which we try to do, but that medication will just slow it down. If it doesn't convert it, it'll slow it down enough so we can see what that underlying rhythm is. Because sometimes atrial fibrillation or atrial flutter will go so fast that it looks like a supraventricular tachycardia. But what will happen is that medication will slow it down enough where we can say, oh, it's AFib. That's not going to convert with that medication, and we'll try other things. Okay. All right, this is where we get into our ventricular rhythms, okay? So you have premature ventricular contractions, okay? And there's a lot of different ones, so it's going to take a second to kind of go over. So when we talk about something being focal, it's the area that it's coming from. Unifocal means it's coming from one area. Multifocal would mean it's coming from different areas, okay? So unifocal PVC is going to have the same shape. So when it happens, it's going to have the same shape. But notice on this PVC, it's not like a PAC. Remember, PAC is a narrow QRS. It looks like all the rest of them. It's just happening too soon. This is a wide QRS, okay? But each time it's happening, it looks the same, which means it's unifocal. It's same shape, okay? Which means it's coming from one particular area in the ventricle. So you have this normal rhythm, and then all of a sudden you have a PAC, which it's a premature, so it happens right after a beat happens, and it's just going to be a wide QRS. And a lot of times people will be able to feel it. They feel weird beats. A lot of times it can happen from increased amount of caffeine, energy drinks, high stress. A lot of different things can cause that, cause PVCs. Okay. So this is happening from one particular area in the ventricle where all of a sudden it's just contracting. Okay, it's getting a stimulation from something else, like caffeine or the energy drink, stuff like that, where they end up, okay, just contracts, like, oh, I'm just gonna do my own thing. Okay. So then you also have bigeminal PVCs, where every other beat is a PVC. So you have a normal beat and then a PVC, a normal beat and a PVC. So every other beat ends up being a premature ventricular contraction, and they call that bigeminal. Okay, every other beat. Okay, then you have trigeminal, which is every third beat has a PVC. So regular, PVC, regular, PVC, and it's consistent that way. Happens that way. Okay, so you have bigeminal and trigeminal. Okay, so you have unifocal coming from one area, happens every once in a while, it's singled out. Okay, then you have bigeminal every other beat, trigeminal every third beat. Then we have multifocal coming from different areas, which means my PVCs are going to look different. Okay, when I have a PVC coming from one area and then a PVC coming from a different area, it's going to be more than one shape because it's coming from different areas. So this is kind of showing that. So if you had a PVC coming from this area, left ventricle over here, and then a PVC coming from over here, they're going to look different. Okay, and so when you see that, you see it like, oh, that's a PVC. Oh, that's another one. So that's multifocal because they're coming from different areas. Okay, more than one focus, more than one area. Okay, then you can also have coupling and triplets. So coupled PVCs means that you have two in a row. So I have a normal rhythm, and then all of a sudden I have two PVCs in a row. Different from bigeminal. Bigeminal is every other beat. Coupled is the two PVCs are happening together. Okay. Then you have triplet where you have three happening together. What does that lead to? What ends up if we don't fix that problem? What happens to the person? What do you think will happen to them? You want to take a wild stab at it? VTAC, exactly. That's exactly what's going to happen. We end up getting a run of VTAC. That's what we call a run of VTAC. If it goes more than 3 beats, we call it a run of VTAC, and we freak out about it because VTAC is not a rhythm you want to see somebody in. Okay, so coupled is 2, triplet is 3, it becomes a run of VTAC, and they can actually go into VTAC. If you consistently start seeing that happen, you on the monitor, you're like, oh crap. Person could be just sitting there talking to you, they don't even realize that it's happening, but you're looking at it going, please don't go and get any more than that. Okay. All right. So a run of VTAC is not good. We have VTAC with a pulse and VTAC pulseless. They can end up starting to have they can go into VTAC and just have VTAC, which we have medications and cardio version that we can do for that. But what we don't want is them to lose pulses, because now they're in cardiac arrest. We have to work a lot harder. Okay, but that's VTAC. Okay, ventricular fibrillation. Ooh, ooh. Okay, now this is the ventricles doing this. Okay, not the atria. So when the ventricles are doing this, there's no contraction happening, which this is pulseless. No matter, whenever you see this, just big wavy lines across the screen, that's ventricular fibrillation. You start CPR. Okay, get the pads on, defibrillate as quickly as possible. So this is coarse VFib. Okay, it's like being on the boat in the middle of the ocean during a nice hurricane. Right? You got big waves. You guys ever watch Deadly Dispatch or anything like that? Where these big boats are coming in these waves. You're just like, oh my gosh, not one. Okay, no, thank you. But that's a big waves. That's coarse VFib. We want to see that. Why? There's a lot of electricity there. Okay, those ventricles are doing this, but there's a lot of electricity there. Okay, which means if I fibrillate as quickly as possible, I can get it to go back into a normal rhythm and start beating again. Okay, so that's what we like to see. That if we see VFib, I want to see it coarse VFib. Okay, the longer you don't do anything, it goes from this to this to that, which goes into asystole. Now you have no electricity going on at all. It's really hard to get people out of asystole. Okay, so that's ventricular fibrillation. This is pulseless VTAC. So remember, we could talk about a run of VTAC, but this is 3 or more consecutive beats, wide complex. So this is a QRS complex, wide. Okay, so we're here all the way up to here, all the way down to here. Okay, that is a wide complex. It's more than 0.12. All right. Okay. More than 0.12. All right. So, and it's consistent. You're not seeing P waves. The rhythm is regular, but there's no P waves. There's no PR interval. It's a wide complex, and you have to ask yourself: is there a heart rate or a beat with it? Okay. Do we have pulses with it or not? Because you can have this happening and not have pulses with it. If you have pulses with it, that means the person is still alive. Ooh, we got to do something about it. Okay. If there's no pulses with it, we start CPR. Okay. So that's pulseless VTAC. It's the brother, if you will, of ventricular fibrillation. All the same medications and everything. We do the same thing we would do for VFib with pulseless VTAC. This is another type of VTAC. Now here, this is called monomorphic. So monomorphic, so the shape of it, the morphic is shape. Mono meaning same or singular, okay? It's a singular shape across the board. They all look the same. That's monomorphic VTAC. This is a polymorphic VTAC. It's coming from different areas of the ventricle. So you have a run from one side, and then a run from a different part, and then the run from that other side, and then a run from it. It looks twisted. It looks like a party streamer, okay? Torsades to points. So it's twisted because it's coming from different areas, and that's why it's called polymorphic VTAC, okay? It's a VTAC. Is it pulses or not? You have to check. It's a pulses or not, okay? So we have different things that we do for torsades to points, but that's what it looks like. It looks like it's twisted, but it's not actually twisted. What's happening is it's coming from different areas, and that's why you get the different shapes, okay? And then we have pulseless electrical activity. So when we start talking about the East 12 leads and things like that, okay, I have a rhythm, but do I have a pulse with it? Pulseless electrical activity means I've got a rhythm, but I don't have a pulse associated with it, which means that there's something blocking that heart from actually working. So I'm getting the electricity for it, but something is blocking. And it can be a lot of different things. Hypothermia, hypoglycemia, hydrogen ion acidosis. So you can get like different things like that are creating the issue. Then you can also have trauma. You can have toxins. You can have thrombus that can be blocking, preventing the heart from actually contracting. A lot of different things. It's our H's and T's that we talk about, which create pulsative electrical activity. And the idea is we have to figure out between asystole and PEA, which is pulseless electrical activity. We look at our H's and T's and say, okay, what could be the underlying reason for why they're in this rhythm? Okay, why are they having a rhythm but no pulses, or why are they in asystole? Is it something that we can fix? If it's something we can fix, great. If it's not, then how are we going to get them out of that rhythm? They're not going to get out of that rhythm unless you fix the underlying problem. So those are things that we look at when we see pulseless electrical activity. Okay, what did they get into something? Did they get poisoned or overdosed? Or we look at all these different things. What was the reason they came in? Well, why did we get called out? And then we go from there. Okay. Are there any questions? We all know what this is. This is the number one rhythm that they shot in the movies. And it drives me crazy. Asystole, there's no electrical activity. There's no energy getting into that part. We don't shock this. Okay. I always think of this example every time I talk about this. I always think of an example. Transformers movie, the second one. They're in the desert. Okay, he's in the desert and he dies. Right, and they put the monitor on. And they say, "Oh, he's in asystole. Shock him!" And they shock him, and he comes right out of it. And they get up and they walk away. Doesn't matter. First of all, you're not supposed to shock it. There's no electricity. What are you shocking? What are you trying to do? Okay, got to figure out the underlying reason why they're in asystole. Okay, very few people come out of asystole. If they do, it's because there was an underlying reason why they went into it, and you were able to reverse that. Okay, don't shock asystole. No. All right, artifact. These are just things that can happen when we put the leads too far away. Okay, tense muscles. Patient is, shaking, or they're cold, or they're moving around a lot. It can create a lot of artifact. You also have wandering baseline where the baseline kind of starts moving around. You have a good rhythm, but the baseline starts wandering around. That's movement. That can be from a lead that's not fully placed correctly, and it's kind of hovering, and so kind of the movement kind of moves that baseline around. Okay, all right. Last thing is pacemakers. So we got our pacemaker spikes. Every time somebody has a pacemaker, usually it's up in that right-hand side right there. They've gotten a lot smaller from original. But they go in and they're basically creating the electrical signal through the pacemaker. So you'll see a spike, and then you'll see a wide QRS and T wave. That's telling you that there is a pacemaker, that they have a pacemaker. Okay? And there's different types of pacemakers. So you'll have your pacemakers that are atrial pacemakers, so it's a single chamber. So it allows for the signal to go through the atria, but then the AV node takes over and does the signal for the ventricles. Then you have your ventricular pacemaker, where they have it going down to cause the contraction for the ventricle, and they're bypassing the atria. Okay, and so you'll see a pacer and then a wide QRS and T wave. All right, and then you have your dual or sequential. So dual chamber. So you have electricity hitting for the SA, and then electricity hitting for the AV. Okay, SA node, AV node, SA node, AV node, causing that contraction to happen. Okay. Any questions on any of this that I went over? Did I explode your brain? Because I'm really hoping I didn't. It's a lot of information. Don't expect to remember all of it. It's just good information for you to kind of just get a general idea, and that way, if it's something that you are needing to move on with later, you kind of already, I've heard that before. I didn't remember anything about it, but I've heard that before. Okay, that's just kind of the general idea. All right. Any questions? I can't send you this PowerPoint. I'm sorry. Unfortunately, this PowerPoint is the property of the office, and they don't let me send it. They don't let me send the